Welcome to Humble Conversations. Today we're honored to have Mike Schroder. What inspired your journey into entrepreneurship?
I had spent about 15 years in the insurance industry as an attorney. Just by chance along that way, I had touched on self-insurance quite a bit, both in workers' comp and in auto liability.
Who was your first client? How did that come about?
When Roundstone first got started, there was actually 4 partners. In the first year, it got so bad that in year 2, I had to buy them out. I really believed in the business and our mission, and so I did it. We got the account out in California. That was a sizable account.
Yep.
That was probably about close to $9 million of stop loss premium.
That's awesome. At what point did you get scared? Because I tell people entrepreneurship is not for the weak.
No, it's definitely not. You get scared every time you lose, every time you miss an account.
This video is sponsored by Roundstone.
Welcome to Humble Conversations, where we explore the journeys of leaders who exemplify humility and innovation. Today, we're honored to have Mike Schroder, a trailblazer in the insurance industry whose visionary approach has transformed how businesses manage employees' health benefits. But before we dive into a story, I want to just give a brief bio about Mike. So, Mike is the founder and president of Roundstone Insurance, a company he established in 2003 to revolutionize health benefits for small and mid-sized businesses. With over 25 years of experience in the insurance industry, Mike has been instrumental in developing innovative self-funded insurance solutions. Under his leadership, Roundstone has been recognized as one of America's fastest growing companies by Inc. 5000 and has received the Northeast Ohio Top Workplaces Award since 2019. So that's really good. That's a sign that you got good culture here, good leadership. So, Mike, let's start with your story. What inspired your journey into entrepreneurship, and how did Roundstone come to life?
Well, thank you for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity to chat.
Yeah, I
So,
appreciate that.
I had spent about 15 years in the insurance industry as an attorney,
Yeah.
as corporate counsel and general counsel. And just by chance along that way, I had touched on self-insurance um, quite a bit, both in workers'
Mhm.
comp and in auto liability. So I kind of was drawn to that
Yeah.
part of the insurance world and thought it was interesting and provided a lot of opportunities. And I also really agreed with its advantages for the customers and for the employers.
Hmm.
Um, at the same time, I also kind of wanted to do things my own way, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And wanted to kind of impact my work environment and the time I had with my family in my own way.
Yeah.
And so I decided to start my own business. And up until that time, no one had really brought self insurance or group captive principles to health insurance.
Yep.
It had been done on the property and casualty side of the business for a long time, but not so much on the health insurance.
Yeah.
And so I thought that might be something that would work. The same reasons people like captives for property casualty control, cost savings,
Yeah.
uh, information. I thought those could apply to health insurance, and so I made the plunge and jumped into Roundstone. So
So, how many employees you have now today?
we have a couple hundred. Yeah.
So, I'm gonna go off the script a little bit because I've always been intrigued about your journey. So, you had me come out and speak last year, um, you know, um, for your big annual conference. It was in New Orleans, and you had said something that really inspired me. You talked about, growing up here, growing up with just, humble beginnings and not just having a lot. And, just seeing just your hardworking family. They sent you to Tulane, and that changed your life. And
Mm-hmm.
and then you went on to become a lawyer, went to Ohio State Law School and stuff like that. So when you are having a successful career as a lawyer, working for these different companies, and then you say, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and start this. When you started it, was it just like you and another person?
Yeah, yeah. I think yeah, from day one it was me and accountant,
Yep.
and I had an accountant because insurance companies do a lot of accounting and finance work, and I was not an accountant, so I did
Yep.
need someone else. But yeah, our
Yep.
first employee, I sometimes ask that, who was the first employee at Roundstone? And it's a
Yep.
trick question because it's not me. It's actually this accountant, because I didn't get paid for a while to get at the very beginning. But
Wow.
yeah, when we got started back there, 2005 or whatever, it was Julie Malloy and
Yeah.
as the accountant and myself. Yeah.
So like when you're going through that, right? Because I think some of the people who are listening, who's going to listen to this is going to be people who obviously want to grow in their leadership, people who are attracted to, just servant leadership, things of that nature, and people who also want to just kind of go to the next level. At what point did you get scared? Because I tell people entrepreneurship is not for the weak.
No, no, it's definitely not. You get scared every time you lose, every time you miss an account,
Yeah.
every time you sit back and reflect on cash flow and,
Yeah.
adding new employees and not having guaranteed the renewal of the old customers. And
Yeah.
um, so it's not a straight line.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
there's setbacks and there's downturns, and you get worried about it. You also get nervous too, like when you lose an employee.
Yeah.
When you're a small company, you really get close with the employees, and you also grow to become very
Mm-hmm.
dependent upon them. And so when you lose
Mm-hmm.
someone, it makes you really nervous.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. So like as you're trying to learn, because I know for me, you have a skill set, you see a gap, you're trying to do it. Where did you turn to for inspiration or like mentorship as you're trying to figure out how do I scale this thing? How do I continue?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've asked myself a few times,
Yeah.
you know, who my mentors were, and
Yeah.
I've never had that like attached at the hip mentor.
Yeah.
I've had some really good bosses that I've learned a tremendous amount from. The CEO of National Interstate,
Mm-hmm.
a guy named Alan Spackman. He was the founder of that company, and I learned a ton from him.
Yeah.
When I worked down in Florida at that workers' comp carrier, there was a fellow down there named Fred Dawson, who was
Yeah.
another long-standing insurance professional CEO, and I learned a lot from him.
Yeah.
Um, both gentlemen influenced me and influenced my management style and my understanding of insurance. Um, but I'm not gonna say I was attached at their hip.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
But my mentors were probably just the people who I grew up with. My mother.
Yeah.
I had my really good friend who got me in the insurance business, Walt Riemann,
Yeah.
was a law school classmate of mine, and I would bounce things off of him all the time. So, and then I've developed some close mentors, just in the last 20 years. A fellow who just retired who used to do all our investment management, a guy named Pete Hallway, and
Mm-hmm.
and he was a mentor. I would confide in him, what's going on. And so,
Yeah.
I would say those four gentlemen, along with my mother, are probably big influences on my professional
Yeah.
career. Yeah.
So did you ever go through in the beginning that first year or two to where you was like, I don't know if this is gonna work, where you thought about quitting? Say it's easier to kind of go back.
Oh yeah, that happens all the time, and I could tell you a story. But before I go on, because I forgot one person, and I'll get myself in a whole heap of trouble if I don't mention her, and that's my wife, Molly.
For sure.
So I know some relationships, people have businesses that are separate, and they
Yep.
don't bring work home and all that.
Yep.
And that has not been the case with Molly and I. She's worked here maybe the last 5 years, 6 years, but she's been my business partner the whole time. So like I would come home
Mhm.
and dump all over her. So,
No,
so
that's
yeah,
good.
she's a mentor, and candidly, in a lot of ways, a much stronger kind of like from an emotional IQ point of view.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, so
No,
she's
Molly's
she's
great.
she's a mentor.
She's great.
I gotta mention
You're a
her
smart
also.
guy. You're a
Yeah,
smart guy.
I'd be in trouble, James.
Last but not
I'd be in a
least.
whole heap of trouble if I forgot her out. But so your other question about quitting, and absolutely. So, and here's the story with that: is when Roundstone first got started, there was actually four partners,
Yeah.
and three of them uh, didn't really agree with the business plan to get started with. They
Yep.
they kind of wanted Roundstone to create some income and then pull the money out.
Yep.
And I had a much longer term vision for the company.
Yep.
And so there was some conflict. in the first year or so, to the point where it got so bad that in year two I had to buy them out, which
Yeah.
ended up being a great thing.
Yeah.
But at the time, that was, that's a tough time to buy out a business when it's 2 years old.
Yeah.
And the last thing you want to be doing is taking cash and giving it to the original founders so early in the
Mm-hmm.
process. But I decided that that was the right thing to do, and I really believed in the business and our mission, and so I did it.
Yeah.
But that was really scary, and there was no doubt times during that negotiation and that back and forth I almost was like, hey, I'm going to go do something else. And so that was a touch and go period of time, because if
Yeah.
we couldn't come to some resolution, I wasn't going to be staying, because I wasn't
Yeah.
going to play the short term game.
Yeah.
I wanted to play the long term game,
Yeah.
and so I was going to be exiting if I couldn't work out
Yeah.
a exit for them.
Yeah.
Fortunately, they took the exit.
Wow. Man, I'm so inspired by your story. I got questions for days. Man, that's why I put this iPad down. Like you talk about the importance of relationships. So you starting this company. Who's your first client? Like how did that come about? How did you even go about trying to approach people to say, hey, I'm doing this, we starting it up, we believe we can save you money and
Some of the first clients were referrals from some of those founders,
yep,
and then they would say, "Hey, we've got this company. It can
yep,
it can manage a captive." And so I'd reach out and talk, and we'd get some of those businesses. And like anything else, you do a good job.
yep,
They say, "Hey, these people are sharp. They know what they're doing."
yep,
I had a pretty decent resume too, so like a
yeah,
lot of folks were gravitated towards, "Hey, I can work with the general counsel of a publicly traded insurance company who's already run group captives
yep,
before." So that attracted people
yeah,
to, if nothing more, to talk to us.
yep,
um, and and through that I kind of leveraged those
yeah,
type of relationships. We did a lot of business initially out of South Carolina, with a company called Companion, and they had a
mm-hmm,
lot of life and health benefit captives that we were
yeah,
managing for them. And it just seemed that one idea after another. Now, you got to keep in mind, Roundstone in its very beginning was what I would call a job shop. And what I mean by that
mm-hmm,
is we would take any captive program you had and we would manage it. And that's how we made our money. And it didn't matter if it was medical malpractice or
yep,
life and health or whatever. We were just getting business, getting revenue, keeping the doors open. It wasn't really until, you know, later in '05 and all that where this concept of a stop loss health insurance captive could really start having some
mm-hmm,
traction. The idea was there from the beginning,
yeah,
but it really didn't gain any traction. And I do believe our first stop loss group captive clientele was a group of hospitals in the Carolinas.
yeah,
And, it took us a while to sell it. And that really got us started. And from there,
yeah,
we did a group of transportation companies in Northern California, the
yep,
folks that would drive the produce to the markets.
yep,
And it just kept building on that
yeah.
every step of the way. Um, so it was, it just
At what point?
scrambled.
At what point did you feel like we got some momentum behind us? Was it like year two, year three?
Yeah, I would say it would be 2008. So year three, when we got the account out in California, that was a
Mm-hmm.
sizable account.
Yep.
That was probably about close to $9 million of
Yep.
stop loss premium.
Yep.
I started feeling like this is pretty viable.
Yep.
And then what we did is we transitioned from doing like one captive at a time, or kind of having everybody jump the rope at one time, and
Yeah.
and formed where we could underwrite one group, one employer at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really opened the doors to opportunities, because it's hard to find blocks of business.
Yeah.
So doing 8 hospitals in the Carolinas, yeah, we pulled it off, but that's tough.
Yep.
Doing, I don't know how many it was, 27 transportation companies in California, we pulled that off, but those things don't grow on trees. So
Yeah.
now you move to where you can underwrite one employer group at a time,
Yep.
and now you do bump into them pretty much everywhere. So
Wow.
that transition happened really in '08 to '10, and so that's where we started to see some. It was very viable, and it started to grow.
Yeah. That's good. So look, we're gonna rewind because I know some of my camera guys, they probably like, now what is a captive?
No, yeah, yeah,
So try to in layman's terms help them explain like what it is that you do.
you're right.
and like what a captive is, and just the gap that you saw for those that are listening that might not understand.
Yeah, so a captive is an insurance company,
Yep.
all right? And most folks, buy an insurance policy from an insurance company, give them their premium, and from
Mm-hmm.
there on out, the claims are the insurance company's problem,
Yep.
and also the profit or underwriting surplus remains with that insurance company.
Yep.
So the commercial market 50 years ago, it actually started here in Ohio in Youngstown, believe it or not, came up with this idea: what happens if we could be our own insurance company? And both as an individual company and then maybe sharing risk with a smaller group of like minded companies. And not only would we have more control over how claims are managed and the coverage under the policy, but when there is an underwriting profit, when there is surplus, that money is ours.
Yep.
We still, like all insurance companies, will buy reinsurance or excess reinsurance, and we'll still engage claims administrators,
Mm-hmm.
third party administrators. But some of the real upside of being the insurance company, we're going to keep with us.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, these things come about because the traditional market isn't doing a real good job of serving the marketplace. And
Yep.
so the first guy out in Youngstown created that captive because the traditional insurance market didn't want his environmental exposures from a factory he had there in Youngstown. And so he said, well, if they're not going to do it, I'll do it.
Mm.
And that was the beginning of it. That was a guy named Frederick Reese.
Wow.
But so it's an insurance company owned by its insureds. That's what a
Wow.
captive is.
Wow.
And there's captives that are owned by one insured. Those are called single parent captives. And then there's ones that are owned by a bunch of insureds, group captives. Roundstone is a group captive. We have lots of employers that participate in our
Yeah.
captive.
And the value added is that when you come to a client, you're saying, "Hey, we're gonna give you some money back."
Yeah. That's
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 unheard of, right?
it's definitely, especially in health insurance. But
Totally.
there's three things why people do this. One is information. You know where your costs are coming from.
Yep.
And this, by the way, these three values apply to any captive, any product. Certainly health insurance, but if we were talking about workers' comp, they apply.
Yep.
So there's information you get you don't otherwise get.
Yep.
There's control over the coverage and over the claim adjudication, over the cost containment, all the decisions that go into making an effective insurance program, you get control if you're in a captive. And then lastly, when you don't spend the money, when there's more premiums than claim dollars, that money stays with you and we give it back to the employers.
Yeah.
And that includes the investment earnings on the premiums.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So, for those that are listening, man, when you think about starting something, it's about really being able to see what gaps are out there in the marketplace and how you can add value and how you can service those people.
Yeah. Yeah, I say to folks all the time, you got to keep in mind, if the traditional health insurance market was not raising costs by double digits, we would be growing a little slower.
Yeah.
If the traditional market provided the control and the information that we do, maybe we wouldn't be as attractive to the
Yeah,
market as we are.
for sure.
But the marketplace wasn't taking and still is not taking great care of that middle
Yeah.
market employer.
Yeah.
And so we are a better alternative.
Yeah. And that's typically like in most industries is that when a new company comes to the market, they're picking up on the deficiencies or the lack of customer service and
Right.
just attentiveness. Um, so as a leader of a company, you having to start it, did you have a reflection on what kind of leader you wanted to be? When did that happen? When because you think about like I've worked for people. Now I'm the guy. And I got to set the tone and provide the vision. Where did you draw your inspiration from?
From doing some things I didn't like doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for as an example, as a lawyer working a law firm, you work a lot.
Yeah.
And so like I remember on Sundays looking out the high-rise building out the office thing of people walking to the Browns game
Yeah.
and getting all kind of frustrated with that. Like,
Yeah.
why aren't I walking to the Browns
Yeah.
game? I'm up here working in an office. And so, and the question of it's a Sunday and I'm doing this,
Yeah.
and then the same thing at other companies I was with where it was just, 10, 11 o'clock at night and we're still working, or just then is
Yeah.
when the team is supposed to go to dinner.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I did say was, I think we can do both.
Yeah.
I think we can have time with our families and also do a really good job at the office. I
Yeah.
like to work, and I put in my share of hours,
Yeah.
but there's a limit to, like,
Yeah.
where you got to take some time off. So I wanted to be a leader that let people have uh, a personal life, and
Yep.
not make them such that their entire life was work.
Mm-hmm.
So that was probably one of the first initial ideas in starting a business, that, hey, no matter what we do here. Now, do some folks come in once in a while to get organized on a weekend here at Roundstone? Yes, we have some
Yeah.
people that do that, but nobody has to do
You
that,
don't have to do it.
and
Yeah.
it's probably 2% of the company that does it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you can have a life and work here too.
Yeah, for sure. Where do you draw your inspiration from these days? When you think about, just continue to evolve as a leader and just having to lead this company.
That's a good question. There's people in the marketplace that, I think are just continue to be creative. Lately, I've been a big fan of Mark Cuban. Just the guy has started and sold many companies, billionaire,
Mm-hmm.
but he always is looking for ways to make the market. So, like,
Yep.
kind of these serial entrepreneurs that
Yep.
are able, those guys I find
Intriguing, huh?
intriguing and motivating. Um, I love reading the books, these authors that come up with these great books, on self introspection. I find them really motivating, and
I
you
know
know,
you have put up a review on James Clear, Atomic
yeah,
Habits,
yeah.
and I happen to just be finishing that book
Yeah,
up.
Atomic Habits is great. My Someone just asked me what are my favorite three lately. The Courage to Be Disliked is a
Yep,
great one. Um, yeah, Atomic Habits, and then I just finished 10x,
that's a good one.
and that's a good one
That's
too.
a
And
good one.
I'm really thinking a lot about that, to sort of how does Roundstone go from, you know 200 employees to 500 employees,
Yep,
and what kind of thought process
yep.
um, makes that happen.
Yeah, I've been
Yeah,
I've been I've been looking at that one. And there's another book that goes with that book, Who Not How.
yeah,
Have
yeah.
you seen that one?
I've read that too. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Who's real good? I read probably that book 8 years ago, because
yeah,
it's a big part of my philosophy about businesses. It's really not about you.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
about the people you have,
yeah.
and that who,
Totally.
not how, is
That's what it's
spot
all
on. Yeah,
about.
yeah,
Yeah, totally,
yeah,
totally. And what I love about 10x, he's establishing this framework that if you really want to scale and go to the next level, if you don't think about it from the terms of how to do it from a 10x, you'll
yeah,
never go. You'll
yeah.
never get there.
Another guy that I like a lot. I like his messaging and the way he goes about stuff. Is, Nick Saban has that whole
Hmm.
focus on, it's the journey.
Yeah,
And he tells a story about how he was about ready to get fired at Michigan State,
yeah,
and basically changed his whole approach to coaching. and
yeah,
and I like that philosophy. Now, I've read his book, which he doesn't get into that much in his book, but lately he's been sharing that philosophy of
yeah.
working on the process. Don't worry about the outcomes, and that that's a influence on me. I like that a lot.
Would you say I was reading this book about wealth, and it was talking about most entrepreneurs, um about how many books they read a year, how they read so many books and they
Yeah,
watch very little TV. Would you say that's true for you?
yeah. Like, I consume books. Like, when I get a good book, I'll burn through them. Like,
Yeah,
when I take a vacation, I'll probably read four books.
yeah.
Um, it's interesting because I'm not always reading. Like, I'll go a day or two and I won't pick up a book.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I do spend some time, and I find a good book, then that's what I do. And
Yeah,
I'm kind of I eat those books up, and especially when they're a real good one. And then if you get a one that's not as good, you gotta have to muscle your way
yeah.
through it.
Of course, of course. So let's talk about humility. Well, so when I throw the word humility out there and just humble leadership, because that's what I preach, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear that?
Uh, People,
People. Tell
yeah.
me more. What about people?
Well, just that it's not you. It's not you.
Yeah.
It's them.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
to me, humble is don't be thinking about yourself.
For sure.
Think about other people
For
for
sure.
whatever thoughts you have.
Yeah.
You know.
No, totally. How do you think humility is a part of what you do here at Roundstone?
Oh, I hope it's a big part in that. I really believe that the success of Roundstone is our people and the development of our people. Um, and how well they do. I'm a big believer in the idea of founders mentality, which is what there's part of that called the frontline obsession. And what that means is that everybody's job is critically important to the mission. And there's no one who isn't important and whatever task they have. And so you need them to be at their top. You can't win, if you don't have everybody rowing in the same direction, everyone performing in the best way. And so that front line, it's not just about the guy in the corner office.
Yeah.
That's a losing proposition right there
Yeah.
because there's no Superman to make that work.
Yeah.
It's about having everybody performing at a high level. So I hope that by me recognizing that, investing in them, being humble about the fact that it isn't just about the guy in the corner office,
Mhm.
that comes through to them and gives them the opportunity to excel and do their best.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the areas here that makes me the happiest is when people come up to me and say, "Hey, man, this is the best. This is the best version of myself I've ever seen," and
Yeah.
that's good because they're feeling good about themselves, but I'm also feeling good about the organization because if they're at their best version, this things are going well.
That's good. As you were talking, I thought about what makes it hard for leaders to be humble.
Well, you got everyone. You're talking to me. You're not talking to the person down in the
Yeah.
claims department. Everyone's you know
Yeah.
raising you up.
Yep.
It's like being the jock in the high school. You get all the attention and all
Yep.
that. And so it goes to your head. You start thinking you're really the one that's important. You also have to make all the decisions. So then you rationalize, well, if I'm making all the ultimate decisions, then I'm the most important one. So
How do
it's
you
you know
how do you guard yourself against that?
you know
What would be your advice to young guys coming up, even young women, that aspire to just, lead or to start something, like how what's your advice to guard yourself against that? Especially when you're smart, you're gifted, you're talented.
yeah, I think the, it makes you feel better
Mhm.
to give, and it makes you feel better when
Mhm.
other people succeed. And I don't care who you are,
Yeah.
that is true. You
Yeah.
get more satisfaction and a better feeling
Yeah.
than, I mean, like, I guess the folks I don't understand is like if you have a choice from helping someone succeed, helping
Mhm.
someone buy a house for the first time in their life,
Yeah.
or you yourself buying a bigger house,
Yeah.
I'm a I'll guarantee you will feel better, at least as far as I know,
Yeah.
helping that other person reach their goal than
Yeah.
you just getting a larger house.
That's true.
And so for me, being humble and all that is really just about, I feel good. I feel
Yeah.
good making others happy and succeed.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I've recently come across this post and I started looking into it. There's something called reverse mentoring now. Have you
Hmm.
heard of that?
No, no.
Yeah, so and the reason why I was intrigued by it, I'm gonna put a post up on LinkedIn later today about it. But like the reason why I was intrigued is because it goes in line with the framework that I've been working on around humble leadership. So typically, mentorship is always like, hey, someone like you that's more seasoned. You're taking someone who's new in the field and saying, I'm gonna give you some lessons, some pointers, some wisdom, advice. But what they found is that with the young generation, the millennials, the Gen Z, that there's a desire for more of a relationship.
Hmm.
And so it doesn't, so it's not so much transactional. And so it's like it's a two-way street. And so instead of me just coming and you telling me what I need to do, it's like you give me an opportunity to share too.
Hmm.
So it's almost like the reverse mentoring is more so like it's a 360 kind of thing. I'm learning from you
Right.
because you're telling me how to get further in my career, but you also learning from me because I'm a 30-year-old in 2025.
Right, right.
And so I guess the way I see humility in that is that the person who's accomplished all these different things, it's like they stay a student.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's why they're reading books all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good way to put it. Make they stay a student,
Yeah.
so that if you're learning about other people,
Yeah.
then you can become humble. And
Yeah.
just recognizing that all those folks have something to add,
Mm-hmm.
that you don't know. A
No, it's
lot.
true. And
Yeah.
and it takes maturity. It takes self-awareness because when you are accomplished, you're financially secure. And everybody is reacting when you come in the room because they know you write the check, you sign it.
Right.
It's like when someone like you talk to the person who might just be sweeping the floor and you learn their story and you're a student, it goes a long way because it's just not something that happens all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it should.
It should. Yeah,
Yeah.
it should. It
Yeah.
should.
Yeah.
Talk about generosity. Like I try to, whenever I'm here and I'm working and I go work with clients, I try to watch a lot and I try to be very observant because I want to continue to grow. And I just take a lot of notes. But one thing I've learned about you is that you're generous. Where did that come from? And then the other question would be, how do you think being a giver, giving back has impacted your success?
Um. So as you mentioned, I didn't. I wasn't born with a lot of money,
Yep.
and my dad and you. I know you were connected to St. Edward, and I'm connected
Yep.
to St. Edward, and so my dad was an orphan
Yeah.
that the Brothers of Holy Cross allowed to go to St. Edward for free.
Yeah.
So I mean, my giving is really mostly focused on education.
Yeah.
So Molly and I are big donors at Urban Community
Yeah.
School, at Resource Cleveland, St. Edward's,
Yeah.
Magnificant, all my alma maters, and it's
Mm-hmm.
all about letting kids have a chance uh, to get a good education, because that was a game changer for my father,
Yeah.
and I believe in it.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe the way you can solve most of our challenges today is through education.
Yeah.
So a lot of the work you're doing
Totally agree.
is so critical. And
Yeah.
so
Totally agree.
if I have some extra money,
Yeah.
um, I wanna give it and have them have that opportunity. That's where our philanthropy is focused, is
Yeah.
on education, and we do it. We do most of it is here locally, but I
Yeah.
have a couple scholarships down there at Tulane and
Yeah.
one at Ohio State, and so it does go back. And I also believe in giving back. I went to Tulane on a scholarship, so
Yeah.
part of it is, I'd be I'd be some kind of knucklehead if I didn't give it
Mm-hmm.
back. But and again, I'll go back to what I said before. Man, it feels good giving away money.
It does. There's actually a Bible verse that says you're more blessed to give than to receive. The
Yeah,
blessing is more on the giving than the
yeah.
receiving.
Gets a little old not
Mm-hmm.
not giving it away, and so and I'll be fair. I mean, my wife Molly, she encourages us to give it away. Let's put it that way.
Do you think it's how do you think it's impacted your success by doing that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think it's
That's like
I
I'm getting you into like a faith realm to
yeah,
to a certain degree
yeah.
by asking that too.
I think it makes me feel good.
Yeah.
It perhaps gives me some. I know the outside world recognizes it and
Mm-hmm.
appreciates the generosity. So I think
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing it for that.
Yep.
I wrestle with keeping these things anonymous.
Yep.
And if you notice, a lot of times I do it in the name of the company just so
Yep.
that the company gets the attention.
Yep.
But I've also been told that it's helpful to these organizations when they connect names,
Mm-hmm.
because then the rest of the community says, "Hey,
Yep.
I need to do that," or
Yep.
"Hey, if Mike Schroder's doing it, that organization must be okay."
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think as a leader, it just shows that I it is this isn't just about me buying another boat
Yeah.
to play around in.
Totally.
So
Totally.
I think that has some
Yeah.
impact on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean but I'm not. I have to say, like, I don't think when someone asks me for money, I don't think, okay, is this going to help? my career?
Yeah.
Is this going to help Roundstone?
Yeah.
I really just simply say,
Yeah.
what's your mission?
Yeah.
How are you helping?
Yep.
How
Yep.
is this from an educational point of
Yeah.
view? And if I don't know how much you know about urban community school, but for a long time they've done a really good
They've done a
job
great
with the
job.
kids at the
Some
at
great
some
kids come out
tough
of there.
at a
Yeah.
tough place,
Yep.
so that's something
Yeah.
that's easy to support
Yeah.
that.
No, no. I think you answered it well. Like, you don't give for what you can get, right? Because
Hmm.
then it feels like manipulation,
Yeah.
right? But the preacher in me knows, like, what Jesus teaches is that, that something happens when you are generous.
Hmm.
It not only do you feel good about it, but it also does something, like, in the earth. Like, from stuff I've been researching, like, the companies that tend to be more philanthropic, somehow it tends to bless the company somehow,
Yeah.
versus companies that are always trying to take and take and take and take. And the only reason why I think it works, from the research I have, is because there's some biblical faith, um, relationship there. That when we add value to people because we care about people, that the universe kind of says, hey, you know what? I'm gonna open it up. It's kind of like that pay it forward.
Yeah.
So for me, when I got into business and stuff like that, my faith was a huge part, because I felt like there are times when I had to just do something for free. I had to sow a seed, or something, not because of what I wanted, but because I believed in it. I felt it was right. But I felt like putting that type of seed out there, that type of energy, I think it helped me in business, because it helped people to trust
Hmm.
and say, James, we're gonna give you a chance. We're gonna believe in you, and so forth, because it was the kind of energy that you was putting out there.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because there are businesses like that. I read that book by the founder of Patagonia,
Mm-hmm.
Let My People Surf.
Yeah.
And when you read that book, I mean, he comes right out and says, like, I did not want to be a business person, and I
Yeah.
don't even like business.
Yeah.
And I just did this because I wanted to make enough money so I go rock climbing.
Yeah.
But his entire uh, company was all about helping other people, and he gives away
Yeah.
a big chunk of his profit every year. And that company has done nothing but succeed. I mean,
Huge.
almost despite like like he doesn't want it to happen, and
And
it
it's
just
just it's
keeps
just like it just keep happening, right?
and then you think about companies too, and those are folks I admire, like that guy
Yeah.
there. I mean, I wanted my company to succeed. I'm not going to say like he did, but I do admire how he's run that company. And then the other one I like a lot, who's doing a lot of this and is very creative, is Costco.
Yep.
I don't know if you saw recently, but now they're going to build apartments on
I
top of their
saw that.
stores for the housing in some of these neighborhoods, and those that's a company that's trying to do good, and
Yep.
it's come. Maybe it's that part of that. Hey, what comes around goes around.
I think so.
They're doing well for the community, and the community's embracing Costco.
That's true.
So
That's happened, in light of all the political tension around DEI.
yeah,
So, like, a lot of companies were like, "Well, we're gonna cancel DEI," and then you kind of wonder, like, well, why did you do it? If it was so easy to cancel. Because for me, DEI is just about the outcome, right? Whatever you call it, right? The outcome is you want people to feel respected, you want them to feel safe, you want them to feel valued, you want everyone to have an equal opportunity to be successful, right? That's the outcome of it. That's whatever you call it, the road there, that's the outcome. But Costco kind of responded. Target said, we're just going to jump off the bandwagon, and their stock just plummeted.
yeah,
Costco said, well, we're going to stick to it because we've been doing this before anybody was calling it DEI,
right,
because we just believe in people.
right.
And I think it goes back to what you said.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that whole thing it's silly. It's unfortunate. It's politics.
Yeah.
Because I mean, any business school is going to teach you
Yeah.
your business will succeed based on the people.
Yep.
So why in the world you don't want to invest in, find out about,
Yeah.
create an environment in which your people excel?
Yeah.
I mean, part of me wants to say I hope my competitors are following that idea that DI is
Yeah.
no good, because you know
Yeah.
what? We
Yep.
will run past them on the track,
Yep.
because what what this is about, and you can use whatever acronym you want for it. It is
Yeah.
about people,
Yep.
and I we need to Roundstone's all about making our people the best,
Yeah.
and I believe that what you teach
Yeah.
with humility
Yeah.
helps us do that,
Yeah.
and I want to find. Hey, I don't know about everybody,
Yeah.
but I do know that if we can learn about each other
Yeah.
and make each other better, I do know that will help this business. So
Totally.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm not going to
Yeah.
debate some acronym,
No,
but
for
I will
sure.
tell you, and you
Yeah.
won't convince me otherwise, that developing people is a good business practice. That's
Totally.
absolutely the case.
Totally. Well, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come in and work with you guys to be able to do it. You know, I believe that I needed to do this, and we called it Humble Conversations because I felt like people were so focused on I'm Republican, I'm Democratic, I'm black, I'm white, all these labels, and I felt like, you know what? I know people like yourself, who's not black, who believe in me, who support me. And so I wanted to put stuff out there so people can really see, you know, how people can come together from different cultures, different backgrounds, and be able to talk, to be able to respect each other, be
Yeah.
able to respect differences and stuff. And so, that's what this is about. But also, I feel like it's my mission to help people understand more about why it's important to value people and servant leadership and so forth. So, I'm just humble and grateful that you gave us the opportunity. I think you got a great story. I think, you're gonna have to let these guys come in and follow you and stuff and tell more stories about what it is that you're doing. Sometimes I ask these questions like, what's a day in the life of a CEO? What would you say to that? You wake up, you work out. What's the day? What's the day in the life of someone
Yeah,
like yourself?
I
Yeah.
do. I mean, I do try to take care of my health, so I do work
Hmm.
out more in a few days, and um, so there's some times with group meetings.
Yep.
There's some times just on the emails, and there's some times scheduling one-on-ones, and there's some
Yep.
time on phone calls.
Yep.
And then I'm a big believer of being a walk-around manager.
Yep.
So I don't just sit in my office, and I rarely have my door closed.
Yep.
So like if I've got nothing going on, if I don't have emails, I don't have a call, I don't have a meeting, then I'm walking around and I'm talking to people, and I'm jumping in to their meetings,
Mm.
and sometimes that creates a little bit of nervousness,
All
like
right. Like, wait,
why
did I
does
do
it?
something wrong?
Yeah, but I like it as much for learning what's happening, and I can offer some insight, and also for getting to know those people
Yeah.
and finding out something about them and stopping at their cubicle. And to me, that's natural. I think the thing that I sometimes wonder about is, for me, walking out this door and stopping in a cubicle and finding out a little bit about that person,
Yeah.
that's just easy. But
Yeah.
there are leaders, and there's managers that I coach that don't do that, and
Yeah.
they struggle with it because
Yeah.
it doesn't come natural to them. And so I
Yeah.
really encourage them, because when you do have, you know I always, one of my favorite sayings of folks, partnerships are easy when everything's going great.
Yep.
You really find out about a relationship when things get a little
Yep.
sideways, when things
Yep.
get a little tough, when there's a challenge.
Yep.
And the better way to get over that is if you know that person.
Yep.
Hey, Mike stopped and talked to me 3 times
Mm-hmm.
before this current time where
Mm-hmm.
he's not real fired up over what I did. But
Yep.
we'll have a much better chance of finding a good outlet on that.
Yep.
And I want to go back to something you were saying before
Mm-hmm.
about you know uh, people and DI and all that kind of stuff. Like,
Mm-hmm.
one of our core values at Roundstone is intellectual curiosity. So one
Yep.
of the reasons why I very much appreciated your work at Roundstone is you're teaching our folks a different way to view things and
Yeah.
a different perspective. And if you believe in the idea of intellectual curiosity and always be learning,
Yeah.
why in the world are you not going to embrace
Yeah.
a different perspective? And you bring that,
Yeah.
and it's a very you know calming. It's not a confrontational
Mm-hmm.
lesson. It's a learning lesson. It's an enlightening lesson,
Yeah.
and so that's very much in line with our core value
Yeah.
of always be learning. And
Yeah.
so I need to always be learning, and I think everybody else does too.
I appreciate that. So a few more questions, then we're gonna get into this and we're gonna wrap it up. Um, if someone were to ask you what's your leadership philosophy, what would you say?
Leadership philosophy. Um, I think I'd go back. I like my core values. Okay,
Yep.
a big part of my leadership is accountability.
Yep.
Own it. I
Yep.
don't think you can succeed as a leader. Like if your old days playing sports.
Mm-hmm.
Or if as a parent, like you need a parent and a coach. You don't need a best friend.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
accountability is a
Yeah.
big part of my leadership. Um, I'm also about productivity. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
got to be organized. You
Yeah.
got to be efficient. We're an EOS company, an entrepreneurial operating system, and so we're organized.
Yep.
And so you have to be efficient.
Yep.
Um, and then there's a book I read way back when I was starting to think about the business world called Thinking Out of the Box.
Mm-hmm.
I think creativity and innovation, you have to promote that
Yep.
with as a leader. I mean,
Yep.
that's a big part of your job.
Yep.
Um, and then lastly, just creating a live well environment for your people. If
That's good.
if you can, and those are
Yeah.
our core values I just shared. But if you can lead with those things as
Yeah.
your guides, you're going to do pretty good.
That's good. So, last question is about legacy. 10 years from now, where do you see yourself?
Well, right now I'm the president and of the company, so I'm very much
Mm-hmm.
involved still on the day-to-day operations and
Mm-hmm.
going to the meetings and all that. So certainly in 10 years, I don't want to be president anymore. I'd like
Yep.
to be in a CEO chairman role where it's
Yeah.
it's it's more of a strategic
Yep.
perspective, more of a mentoring of the then president,
Yeah.
and then I'd like to have a much heavier involvement in the philanthropy, and
Yeah.
I do a little bit of speaking at events, and also mentoring in my college at Tulane. So maybe do some more of that, but
Yeah.
much more philanthropy and giving back, and a little bit more just mentoring and strategic for this place.
That's good, man. So what we do is we end every podcast with um with a question. So I developed these. Roundstone Insurance is proud to sponsor Humble Conversations, a podcast that elevates meaningful leadership stories rooted in humility, impact, and purpose. Headquartered in Rocky River, Ohio, Roundstone believes in the power of authentic leadership and the value of humility in shaping stronger, more resilient teams. Since 2003, they've been helping small and mid sized businesses deliver affordable, high quality healthcare driven by a commitment to learn, adapt, and lead with purpose. Roundstone Insurance pioneered a self funded captive health insurance model that delivers robust savings for small and mid sized businesses. Roundstone is part of the solution to rising healthcare costs while maintaining affordability and high quality of care, bringing new jobs and economic growth to Northeast Ohio since 2003. One of Roundstone's core values is always be learning, a principle that aligns with the mission of Humble Conversations. Dedicated to growing as leaders, embracing feedback, and applying new lessons to serve clients and the community better, Roundstone is helping employees create healthier and more sustainable futures. Visit roundstoneinsurance.com to learn more. Roundstone Insurance, always learning. Um, so these are like humble conversations.
Hmm.
It's like a team deck. And so what I try to encourage, leaders and managers to do is like grab this, encouraging people to use this so that they don't have to think, right?
Hmm.
Because sometimes it's hard to think of a good question to get to know people and stuff
Oh,
like that.
okay,
So
yeah.
you could choose, you can look through those cards and you're gonna ask me one. Um, and then I'm gonna ask you one, right? And because this just goes to, so let's say for example, you don't have a lot going on, you're gonna go around and talk to people. You're gonna use one of these now, Mike.
Yeah, I can walk around and ask them this question. Yeah,
Yep. So I'll
yeah.
go first. What's a bold idea you've been hesitant to share?
A bold idea. Um, So a big part of how we communicate with our customers is on with reports and
Mm-hmm.
on cost containment, um, and but a lot of these solutions are all different, okay, and they all have a different website and a different
Yeah.
name.
Yeah.
And what one of the things I really would like to do would be a really big investment is to bring it into sort of one unifying portal. So like
Okay.
if you want to know about your health plan,
Yeah.
you open up this app and it's got everything there.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a recent new
Wow.
idea.
That's good.
But that's easier said. That's a huge technology lift.
Undertaking. Yeah.
It could become a real black hole. It
Yeah.
could be like just, hey,
Putting money there.
your
Money. Yeah.
money,
Yeah.
but it's a nice. It would be really nice because ease of doing business is big for our customers.
Wow. That's good.
You
Well, you.
ready?
Yep.
All
Yep.
right, you're right. This is for you. How can our team create an environment of trust?
That's good. That's good. That's kind of what I come in and help organizations figure out. I think, one of the ways that, people can create an environment of trust, I think it goes back to the accountability, right? I tell people all the time, like, you could say accountability, but accountability doesn't happen unless a person wants it, right? That they got to want it. And so I think a lot of times what helps with trust is just people having some type of standards, right? Some type of expectation of saying that this is how we talk to people, this is how we treat people. I feel like when people know where they're going, when it's clear, taking David Horsager language, when it's clear, when people can trust the character, I think that helps to cultivate the trust, right? When people know that, I believe that this company cares about me, and people believe you got their best interests in mind, I think it creates an environment of trust. But I think a lot of organizations I work with, oftentimes, they're not clear about their purpose, their values, their vision. People are, sometimes they say something, but they do something different. So it's not consistent. So I think when people are consistent and people care, and you're able to kind of infuse that in your organizational culture, I think it creates an environment of trust. But I think it starts with leadership. Sometimes I'll go places, Mike, and they'll be like, "Man, I love what you're saying, Dr. Knight, but I don't trust the people up in the corner office,"
Hmm.
and so forth. So that's why I think it starts with the leadership.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would agree. One of the things lately that I've learned is you can have all those things. This is how we treat people. You can have
yeah,
that mission. You can
yeah,
say this, and the reality of it is people are still going to make mistakes occasionally,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so you have to be so committed to it to stop,
yeah,
freeze, and say, you know what, I made a mistake.
yeah,
This is
yeah.
because if you don't do that,
That's good.
the way I put it, you're
That's good.
making big withdrawals from the trust bank,
Yep,
and
that's
so
good.
it's like those practices to me aren't part time,
Yep,
and we're not perfect. So along the
yep,
way, we make mistakes,
yep.
and we just need to be, strong enough to stop and say, hey,
Yep.
I goofed up, and this
That's
is
good.
inconsistent.
That's
And I
good.
think a lot of times if you do that, you can actually make a trust deposit,
Yep.
even though you did something that really should be a withdrawal.
That's good. That's
Yeah,
good. That goes back to the humility framework.
yeah,
You have to be secure in who you are as a leader to be able to be vulnerable.
yeah,
And it's in times of crisis or mistakes that trust is really cemented, because they say, wow, he owned up to it. He admitted, I did it wrong. And it gives other people permission to do it.
hmm,
It's that idea of grace.
yeah, yeah. So
That's good.
trust is a big. Actually at this year's Captive Forum. I spoke on trust,
Yeah.
and because almost all customer relationships are built on trust.
Yep.
And so, you asked a good question earlier. What about those earlier customers? Why
Yep.
would they trust this startup
Yep.
insurance company? But this book I read, and I'm forgetting the name of it. I'd have to go back, but it has like a 6-part analysis for any customer to consider.
Mm-hmm.
So you should be looking at cost, and you should be looking at references in it, but all of that feeds up to that idea of trust for your customer.
Yeah.
And so this is how you build a website.
Yeah.
is you have to hit on all these elements in order to create that trust, and then guess what? You might have yourself a customer.
Wow. That's good stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Man, I
So,
appreciate you taking so much
oh, I
time
I
to.
enjoyed. I could talk to you all day long. So
Yeah, man,
yeah,
this was good.
yeah. That's what you got to need. If you talk to a business owner about their business, they'll never shut up.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
yeah. So
But you smart, man, and it's part of the reason why I wanted to interview you, and I knew you got a great story, and we probably could go for another couple hours, but I know you gotta go to your next
yeah,
meeting too.
I think I do have other things going on. I don't know.
For
I'll find
sure.
out.
For
I should
sure.
probably pay closer attention to my. I think I walked into here like 2 minutes before our
That's all right. That's
discussion. So
Hey, if you had too much time, I might be worried,
yeah,
right?
yeah, that's good. But I do appreciate the time and
No, thank
the
you.
interest in talking to me. That's very nice of you.
Yeah, yeah, man, I appreciate it. So thank you for watching, guys, and Mike, I appreciate
Yeah.
it, man. Thank you so much.
Good to see you.
Thank you for watching Humble Conversations with Dr. James Knight. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring you more great content. See you next time.